Welcome to Estate Planning Nightmares and How to Avoid Them. I'm your host, and Jon Braddock, an author of Click Here When I Die, and the founder of My Life and Wishes, The Legacy Vault, an online planning and document storage solution created specifically to make things easier for those you love. Today, I have a very special guest joining me, Attorney Libby Banks. Now, all right, I know you're probably thinking, that name sounds familiar, and you would be right. I was a guest on Libby's podcast back in December, which I shared with all of you on my channel as well. And it was such an honor to be on her show. I asked if she'd join us and share her story with our audience. But the fun part is now I get to ask the questions. But say, before we jump in, I'd like to give you a little bit of background on Libby. Libby is an accomplished attorney and the owner of the law office of Libby Banks. She began her legal career as a litigator, handling high-profile cases in Oklahoma City, and she even briefed a case presented to the U.S. Supreme Court. After relocating to Phoenix in 2000, Libby transitioned to estate planning, founding her own firm in 2013. Driven by her experience resolving contested probate cases, she developed a passion for helping families avoid the emotional and financial turmoil caused by poor or worse yet, non-existent estate planning. Her practice now specializes in creating customized estate plans, wills, trusts, and asset protection strategies tailored to clients of all ages and all financial situations. Libby is an active member of professional organizations, including Wealth Council and BNI, and she supports charitable initiatives like Amanda Hope Rainbow Angels. Beyond her legal work, Libby enjoys reading mystery novels, spending time with her family, and escaping to Arizona's White Mountains with her husband, Andy, and their rescue dogs, Princess and Willow. Libby's dedication to preserving family harmony and preventing estate planning nightmares is inspiring, and I'm excited to learn from her expertise today. Welcome, Libby.
Thank you so much, Jon. I'm happy to be here.
I'm super happy to have you. I had so much fun with you on your podcast that it's like, when that's my turn, let's have some fun here.
Yeah,
And,
yeah. Well, you were a great guest, so.
oh, thank you. But yeah, the show is just all about helping people understand. It's just so many people have not done estate planning, and of course, the one thing we all know is that we all will die at some point, which why it makes it very critical that people do their estate planning. But
absolutely, yeah.
But I know I'm preaching to the choir.
Yes, you are.
But as my audience knows, I love to dig into passion, background, and motivation. What gets people up in the morning to do what they do? So, can you share with us a little bit about your journey from litigation to estate planning, and then what sparked your passion for this area of law?
Absolutely. So I first got involved in some contested probate type cases where there's no will, or there's a will, but people are contesting it, or it's unclear what the deceased person's wishes were. My first step into that was legal research and appeals. So I was brief writing. So all I saw was the technical questions, which were very interesting. Those cases are very interesting legal matters, fun to construct arguments and that sort of thing. The attorney I was working with finally had enough confidence in me to have me start meeting with the clients. And that's when I realized how awful this is for the families. And so, it's families falling apart. It's stepmothers who don't understand why the stepkids are suddenly attacking her because their father has passed away, even though sometimes she helped raise them. So that's when I realized just how important it was to have those types of documents in place, to really have a good, solid plan, to know ahead of time what you could anticipate. And so that's kind of where I made the transition. I had a couple of really bad cases where blended families in particular can be very problematic, where the kids had taken one parent behind the other's back, their parent, to change things and to move assets shortly before they died. And so you just see those kinds of things that people operating, probably out of fear that they're never going to be able to enjoy an inheritance, that, maybe stepmom or stepdad will remarry and all of it will go to somebody they don't even know, that kind of thing. But it's also greed. And so we just have to realize as we're doing the planning that people are human, and sometimes grief makes people do things that you would not expect of them. And so planning ahead of time can make a difference in how the family is able to navigate and whether the family continues to be a family after you've passed away.
Oh, yeah, it's so true. And I speak with so many estate planning attorneys like yourself, and the stories are just crazy. Families who haven't spoken for years since someone died. And the thing is funny is we always talk about it. Michelle and I have 6 children between us, and raising the kids. I mean, the kids couldn't agree on what movie we'd watch or what to have for dinner, or what restaurant should we go to. It was always a fight. And so if we stop and think for a minute that our kids will agree on everything after we're gone, we are sadly mistaken, because you're absolutely right. Grief causes things to come out in people that ordinarily probably wouldn't.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. And can you share, because I always we call it estate planning nightmares for a reason. So we want people to understand that there are horror stories out there, but they can be prevented. Do you have any particular story or contested probate case that you can share with us? Obviously without naming names.
Yeah. So I'll start with one. Let me give you two. One was
Okay.
everybody thought they were doing the right thing. The deceased parents, I think, really thought they were doing the right thing. They put a trust in place. It was very old. They wanted to make some changes. They happened to mention it to their CPA, who is a great numbers guy, but CPAs aren't always great language guys, right? And he said, you know what? I can do that for you. I can write up that little, it's a small amendment, right? So he did.
Oh,
And of course, it was completely unclear. It could be interpreted maybe even a third way, but certainly for sure, it could be interpreted two very different ways. And so my client was the trustee who came to me and said, can you read this over and tell me what I'm supposed to do? And I said, read it over, and I said, I can't tell you what to do. Let's talk to the family and see if we can get an agreement. Well, of course we couldn't. And so she's then dealing with her siblings. We had to go to court to get the court to interpret it. And you never know what the court's going to do. So, we argued one way, they argued another. But that was one of the last litigation cases I did that I decided, I just don't want to have to deal with that anymore. I'm going to let somebody who more enjoys that kind of fight and the argument take that over. And I'm going to make sure that I get the word out, do what I can for the people who will come to me, but get the word out as much as possible. Use a professional, do it right, keep it updated. Those are the things that will help make sure that when the time comes, whoever you've appointed as your trustee or executor has clear directions and the least possible situation for a fight. So.
Oh, yeah. Amen. And as probate takes time.
Yeah.
And then when multiple parties are involved, hiring their own legal counsel and all that, kind of at the end of the day takes away from the value of the estate once it's finally split up. And
Right.
yeah, the pain. So
Yeah.
Yeah, to emphasize your point, you know, having a good estate plan and a trust in place is critical,
Yeah,
almost as critical as making sure you keep it up to date and you update it with your estate planning attorney, not someone who says, "Oh, I can save you $5 and do that for you."
right. Absolutely. Absolutely. The other one that I see that I think people don't think about is we have run into cases where somebody's inherited something along the way. And sometimes, it's an only child, and they, mom died, I got the house. And what we're discovering is they never got the house in their name. They didn't realize they needed a probate. We had a situation once where the mortgage company he'd been paying all along, but they discovered that mom was dead, so they started foreclosing. And he waited to come see us, so it was, it made it really tricky to try to get things wrapped up so that he could assume that loan, which he had some legal rights to do, and get the house into his name. We had another situation where because they hadn't put the name in, or hadn't done the probate, hadn't put it in the two sisters' names, they weren't getting the tax notices, so they had not been paying taxes for several years. And they were about to lose the house in a tax sale because somebody else had realized they weren't paying taxes. They paid the taxes and followed the law to try to take over the property. So it's really important if your parent has died and you're expecting that you inherit, that you actually make sure you do the right things to put those things in your name. It may well involve a probate, if there's no will or trust, or if there's only a will, then, we may end up with a probate, especially if there's real estate. So it's not just planning beforehand. It's also, there's some planning and some things that have to be done when someone passes away to make sure everything's wrapped up the right way.
Wow. Yeah, I had a guest a while back, and I can't remember the whole story, but it was a scenario where um, second marriage, um, the husband, whose house it was, ended up dying. But before he died, he wanted to make sure that his wife was going to get the house. And apparently, all they did was got her name on the mortgage.
Hmm. Yeah.
And then after he passed, as you can imagine, there was quite a family fight. She thought she was entitled to the house, but nope, she was only entitled to be, at that time, paying the mortgage.
Oh, gosh.
And the family fought, and it was really long and drawn out process. Something that at least a will would have helped with, and whichever state it was, um, the children of the deceased were entitled to 50%.
Yes, that's true in Arizona as well. If you don't have the right plan in place, if your spouse owned the house, even if you contributed the entire payment for all of the house, if it's just in their name and they have kids from a previous marriage, those kids are entitled to that 50% interest. Yes.
It just amplifies the old saying that if you think life is messy, death is much messier.
Right, that's great. Great way to put it. Yes, indeed.
Oh, well, let's chat about estate planning essentials. So I mean, you've been doing this for a long time. Why do you think so many families neglect proper estate planning?
Sometimes I think they haven't yet been through the death of someone who has the types of property they have. So they don't realize how much of a problem it can be for the family that's left behind if they don't do a plan. Many of our clients who are coming in for the first time to do planning, it's because a parent passed away and it was a mess and it was burdensome, and they are not going to leave that mess for their own children. So sometimes they just don't know. You don't know what you don't know. I think the other is, especially maybe for younger people who sometimes have children, they should be putting something in place to make sure guardians are named and that sort of thing. They're not going to die. they're not planning on dying anytime soon. And it's so true. Yes, that you're probably not, you might not, but we drive in Phoenix here and it's the traffic is awful. And so what I've been telling people as I talk with them lately is, you're not planning for your house to burn down, right? But you're still getting homeowners insurance and you're making sure that it's covered because it could happen. So think of estate planning as just that insurance. You're just making sure there's a plan in place. You're not planning on dying, but if you do, you've got it covered. So I think that's a good transition because I think a lot of people are like, well, I'm not sick. Yeah, I'm 70, but my parents live to be in their 90s. So I think I'm going to be good for a few more years. I'll just kick that can on down the road and not do something. And of course, we never know what life is going to bring us. And we definitely need to plan for it. The other
Yeah,
thing I don't think, go ahead.
yeah, I love the insurance policy analogy because the one thing is we buy the homeowners or the auto insurance and the house may never burn down. We might not have a wildfire or anything like that, but the estate plans and insurance policy it absolutely would pay,
Yeah, yeah,
right? Because it's going to be
absolutely.
there.
Yeah.
And for our young folks in the audience, you know, Libby and I are kind of probably in the same age category, and we both remember very well when we were immortal.
Yeah.
But through my time on this earth, I have lost many friends, and at young ages, and so remember, death is not just for old people.
Yeah, absolutely. The other thing that people don't think about and why they don't plan is incapacity planning. So yeah, you may be in a car accident, you may not die, but you could be in a situation where the brain is scrambled for a while. Maybe you're in a coma for a period of time, and the estate plan makes sure that you've named who would take over and manage things for you if you can't. Even your spouse doesn't have full legal rights to do everything for you. But the estate planning piece, we can put things in place so that they can manage finances. They could sue the company or the people who, ran you over at the stop sign. Uh, and it's very clear that they have certain rights to do things if we put in place, financial powers of attorney. And with the trust, then they can act as sole trustee. Your spouse can to make sure everything's taken care of. Or if you don't have a spouse, that you've got that next person lined up to, if nothing else, keep the bills paid while you're not able to manage your finances yourself.
Yeah, and so important, and that healthcare power of attorney is critical. I mean, that a lot of people say, what's that all about? It's like the easiest way I can think to explain it is it gives you a voice when you can't use yours.
Yes, absolutely. And, the healthcare power of attorney in particular, a lot of my clients who come in are not married to the person that they would want to have make these decisions. They've either decided not to marry or it's a friend rather than a partner. And in order for that person to be able to act, they have to have that document because they're not legally entitled. A spouse has some legal rights on the healthcare side. A child has some legal rights. That's about as far as it goes.
Yeah, if anyone out there listening wants to see how bad things could be if someone doesn't have uh, healthcare power of attorney or advanced directives, do a Google search. The name Terry Schiavo.
Yeah,
I believe it's spelled Shiavo or something like that, but it'll come
that's
up.
right.
It is a nightmare beyond belief.
Yeah. Absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah.
And that was a motivator for a lot of changes in the law that have been good, but it's certainly putting those documents in place for healthcare and what your end of life wishes would be, so that you've spoken to your family about what you would want is just crucial.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, can you real quickly, and we talk about this periodically, but when I ask people if they have an estate plan and someone, they say to me, well, yeah, I've got a will. And I said, well, tell me what you think that will do. And what they're actually describing is a trust, which they
Yeah,
don't have, but they think it. So can you give us a real simple explanation of a difference between a will and a trust?
sure, absolutely. So I'll start with the trust. So the trust that we do for estate planning and probate avoidance and making things easy is a revocable trust. So it's called the revocable living trust. In it, you express who would be in charge of your estate on your passing, who would be in charge if you're incapacitated, and what your wishes and directions are, both for your care financially, if you're incapacitated, and how things would be distributed on your passing. So in many ways, a trust supplants the will in terms of what people think of the distribution of their assets. The trust itself then has to hold the assets that we're going to have governed by it. So we, in our office, we transfer the home into the trust. We work with attorneys out of state if you've got out of state property. And then we guide our clients through how to get bank accounts in, stock accounts, those kinds of things, and what they need to make sure has beneficiaries, because some things just can't go into the trust. An IRA or a 401k has to stay in your name. Life insurance policies, there's no reason to try to have the trust be the owner. You just make the trust the beneficiary. So then anything that's in the trust or paid to the trust on your passing is governed by the terms of your trust. With the will can contain also the distribution directions. Here's who I want to be my executor, or here we call it personal representative. Here's how I want my property distributed. But by itself, it doesn't avoid probate. The trust does. We don't have to file it. We don't have to get court permission for your trustee to act. They step in, showing death certificate or that you're incapacitated, and then they just take off and get things done. With the will, if that's all you have, then we end up taking that to the court and asking the court then to appoint the person that you've designated as personal representative. And we have to give notice to heirs. So somebody who's disinheriting a child, we have to give that child notice, even though they're not getting anything. So, there's a lot of chance for that will to get contested, or for things to go to the contest side of things, because we have to get those notices that aren't necessarily required with the trust situation. So that's how the two of them act. When you have a trust, you actually still do a will, because state law still says if it's just in your name and you haven't put a beneficiary on it, it's either governed by state law. And for instance, that's where your wife could get 50% and your kids from the previous marriage get 50%. So it's either governed by state law or it's governed by your will. And so when we have a trust, the will says, hey, I have a trust. If I forgot to put something in it, if it's just in my name, it goes to the trust so that trustee can distribute as I've directed.
Is that what you'd commonly refer to as a pour over will?
Yes. Yeah. Thinking of it as it catches those assets and pours them over to the trust. Yep.
Yeah. Anything that we've forgotten, or maybe I've acquired a new asset and I die before I come in and have my annual trust review with my attorney. Okay. Interesting. And the other thing, if I understand correctly, which is kind of important, a will is a public thing, meaning, anyone can find copies of wills that are going to probate and doing those things. Whereas a trust, since it's a probate avoidance tool, is private.
Yes, absolutely. So when we file the will with the court, along with several documents, that's all public records. So not only can they look at the will, they can look at who did you have to give notice to, who are your heirs, If we have to file an inventory with the court of the property, they know what you own, they know who is inheriting it, they know about the fight, if there's a fight. So anybody can go and get that. It is so easy that early in my career, I asked my assistant, I said, I need to get a copy of this will from this probate because somebody had called me for some assistance. Can you go over and get it? And about 5 minutes later, they called and said, oh, I paid $2. They're going to email it to me. Like,
Wow.
wow, it was that easy. It was that easy.
It also seems like, because my mind always goes to the dark side. It seems like that could be a haven for bad people
Yeah.
trying to see what's out there and then scam some poor grieving widow.
Absolutely. And well-intentioned people. I've had clients who have done the probate situation. They're now doing a trust with me, who've told me that real estate agents were sometimes coming to the door and banging on the door, trying to get the listing or trying to do a cash offer. So you get inundated with people who want the real estate, especially here now. It can be, difficult to find those properties, and people are looking for the bargains and trying to create bargains by taking advantage of people who are grieving and maybe have not figured out the value of the home yet.
Wow. Yeah, we're coming close to our time, but a couple more quick questions I want to ask you. Because one, so how do you approach scenario? Let's say you have a client, but they don't have any close family members. Maybe they have significant assets or even beloved pets. What kind of planning do we do there when I just don't have anyone to leave things to?
So the two issues that arise there with clients are sometimes they recognize they need to do something, but they don't know who would I appoint as a trustee to take care of me, and who am I leaving my assets to even, and who would wrap up the estate. So as far as appointing somebody who could take control of the estate and manage things for you or to distribute after you're gone, there are private fiduciary companies who will serve as executor or trustee. There's private trust companies, and we have several that we have worked with that we trust to do the right job for you. So that's often a good solution for somebody who either doesn't have someone or doesn't have someone that they could rely on. Maybe it's, a child with autism or something who really would be overwhelmed by trying to handle it. They just need somebody else. And then a lot of our clients who don't have family that they want to leave stuff to will find charities. So that's always a good opportunity to make what you've earned during your lifetime really count to help somebody else. And so, for us, sometimes it's pets. Amanda Hope, it's children with cancer. So, we've worked with the Arizona Humane Society as well. So, there are a lot of great charities out there that would appreciate those kinds of gifts to allow them to serve their community.
Yeah, and it's interesting, and I'm not in that position because we have 6 kids, so pretty much we have no assets. But
Yeah.
if I were one of those people and I had a lot of assets, and I'm not going to be able to spend them down through the rest of my life, and I'm thinking about charities, I think a fun thing would be to do is to rely on some of the gifting that you can do and start leaving stuff while you're still alive so that you can actually enjoy seeing the benefits. And then also you can see if they're actually managing them properly.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And there's some great tax strategies around that too. Some ability. So somebody who's still working, but has to take required distributions from an IRA. Sometimes they're like, I really don't want to have to, but I have to, and it's just bumping my taxes up. And there's some strategies so that it never hits your tax return. It goes straight to the charity. So that's something to think about in addition to the annual tax credit that Arizona has for charitable giving, foster families, and schools.
That's great. So as we're winding down, for our listeners who are just starting to think about estate planning, regardless of their age, what would you recommend the first step they take today?
So, if they are aware now, I need to do something, we actually encourage them to consider coming to see us, because we will walk them through a process that lets them begin to think about what they need to do. So a lot of times we get that question, I'll be giving a seminar and they'll like, I just don't even know where to start. Well, it's a good place to start because we're going to give you a questionnaire that really walks you through the things you need to be thinking about. And so you get a chance to see, oh, here's where I start. I start by listing my assets. That's a good one. I start by thinking about who would I want to leave things to. I think about who do I trust to help me out with all of this. And so that's a great place to start, I think. There's a lot of misinformation on the internet. Some of it makes it sound so overcomplicated. And we really try to make sure that we simplify it. And because we get that questionnaire ahead of time, we really talk about your situation, not, somebody who's got 100 million, or, if you've got several properties, somebody who all they have is a bank account. We're going to talk about your situation so that how does it really affect me? Because that's what you really need to know.
Yeah. And, I can't overemphasize enough how important it is and invaluable it is to speak with a professional estate planning attorney. They can ask you the questions. I mean, I can go to Costco and I can pick up a will and a trust kit,
Yeah.
but it's not going to ask me the questions that it should be asking me,
Right,
so that,
right.
things are done the way they should be. So,
Yeah. Or counsel you about your bad idea, right? Sometimes clients come with ideas and we're like, well, have you thought about how this, if this happens, how that is impacted by, so yeah, so counseling is good. And being
yeah.
able to work with somebody who's seen the bad sides of how things can go can be very helpful.
Well, I tell people all the time when I'm working with people, it's like, hey, if you think this is a bad idea, tell me. Yeah. So, you know.
Right. Yes.
Libby, thank you so much for making the time. I know you've got a very busy schedule, but to be here on our show today, I mean, your insights and advice are truly eye-opening, and I always love our conversation. So, for our listeners, what's the best way for them to connect with you and learn more about you, your firm, or questions in general?
Yeah, so a great place to go would be to our website. We have a lot of information there, videos, whether you prefer videos, and blogs if you like the written content. So that's, excuse me, www.libbybanks.com. That's a great place to go. We have a YouTube channel, so that's another one. Again, if you really like learning through videos, we have several videos about how trusts and wills work. We have My Life and Wishes up there, our podcast with you. So there's a lot of information there if you're just trying to get a little better educated first. If you're ready to make an appointment, just call our office, 602-375-6752. We offer a no-cost initial consultation. We just ask that you fill out that worksheet. And if you do have any type of documents that you're looking to update or maybe replace, then we like to get those ahead of time too.
That's beautiful. And I love that. All you Arizona folks, especially down here in the greater Phoenix, Scottsdale area, no cost consultation. So if you're not sure where to start, that's a great place to start. So, and thank you for sharing that. And I'm going to make it super easy for the audience to connect, because I have included all of Libby's contact information below in the show notes. So please feel free to reach out to Libby. Thank you all for tuning in again to Estate Planning Nightmares and How to Avoid Them. If you've enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe to our channel, give us a thumbs up, leave a review, and share it with someone that needs to hear it. Thank you so much, Libby, for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. And until next time, remember, your life is your legacy. So plan ahead and make it a great day.